Before we add the next feature to our spoiler project, I want to introduce you to an approach for how to use JavaScript on web pages. Unobtrusive JavaScript. Unobtrusive JavaScript is basically three principles. The first is that JavaScript, as the functional layer of web pages, should be kept separate from the structural and presentational layers, the HTML and CSS. We've got that covered by keeping all of our JavaScript in a separate file. The second principle is that cross-browser inconsistencies should be accounted for. Users should have similar experiences regardless of which browser they're using. As we've discussed, that's pretty much what jQuery was invented for, so we're covered there. The third idea is called progressive enhancement. Progressive enhancement is the idea that your website's core content and functionality should be available even when JavaScript is blocked, disabled, or not fully supported. Why would someone have JavaScript turned off, you may ask? Your user might have some kind of firewall or plugin installed that ends up blocking or breaking your scripts. Something might go wrong at the network level, causing your scripts to only be partially loaded. A business might disable JavaScript on employee computers to limit the use of certain websites. Your user could be using an older browser at a public library or school with older computers, or using your website in a developing country that doesn't yet have the technology to support modern browsers. Or your script could simply fail for some unknown reason. Think about progressive enhancement in this way. It's about making sure your site's core content and functionality is available regardless of the technology your user has access to, and adding on interactivity and other bells and whistles from there. Take Google.com as an example. What is the function of Google.com? What should the user be able to do? Well, as I'm sure you know, Google is a search engine. Its core functionality is that users should be able to go to the site, search for a term, and get a list of search results. Everything else, the little animations and games that are available sometimes, the autocomplete feature, and the search by voice feature, are all add-ons that enhance the core purpose of the site. If I were to search for something like kittens, Google wants to know my location. I get some latest tweets about kittens, this top stories widget that shows me all of the latest and greatest news about kittens, and also this button here where I can search for a new term by voice. Let's turn off JavaScript for a moment. I'm going to go into DevTools in Chrome, click these three dots, then Settings, and then scroll to the bottom here and click this Disable JavaScript box. Now I will refresh, and with the JavaScript turned off, you can see the page looks a bit different, and the Search by Voice button has disappeared. If the Search by Voice button element had been included in the markup, it would be visible but not functional to a user whose JavaScript is unavailable. The resulting user experience would be frustrating. Have you ever spent a few moments furiously clicking on a button that doesn't respond? Not fun, right? So some of the fancier options might have disappeared, but I can still search for a term and get some results. Depending on your specific project or situation, it might not make sense to work as hard as Google does to ensure that your website remains functional without JavaScript. However, thinking about it this way can help us decide, in our own projects, which HTML elements we should generate using JavaScript and which elements we should write directly into the HTML. I'm going to turn JavaScript back on by unclicking this button and refreshing. And let's go back to our project. What does our application do? Well, it allows the user to read a spoiler about a movie. We'll need to make sure our content, the spoilers, are accessible even if the JavaScript doesn't work. That means the spoiler text should always be present in our HTML. On the other hand, we can use JavaScript to dynamically generate the HTML for the button and insert it onto the page. That way, if JavaScript isn't available and the button won't work for a user, it won't show up. Let's do that in the next video.